Hello, this is Ken Ferrie with this week's Boats in the Field report. Harvest is beginning to roll in some areas. The early April corn is drier than most people think. Reports coming in the Pekin area, corn down around 21% moisture. Hearing large swings in the yields within a field from like 180 to 250. One grower said the field averaged 210. This area was in the 260s last year. One operation southwest of Hayworth had about 400 acres out. It too was testing at 20% moisture, and they were holding a 230 average so far. Again, these areas last year were in the 260s to 270s. When we were yield checking these fields, estimates were coming in that 220 to 240. The grower said division numbers look to be closer to 80 or 85,000 kernels per bushel as they start this harvest. Some March planted beans, 2.8 beans came out, and they were 85 bushel, so strong start there. This past week we had several good grain producing days for those crops that are still filling. The disease continues to put pressure on grain fill, and soon, unfortunately, standability in corn. While the rust has slowed, the northern leaf blight and tar spot have really taken off. Now, of course, it's too late to do much at this stage, but start scouting that heavy pressure to get a feel for which fields are going to need to come out first. As time marches on, we'll need to be redoing our push test on a weekly basis to readjust the harvest schedules ahead of the combine. In many areas, the soybeans are out of water, which will cause them to have reduced bean size. Without rain, the later bean maturities may get beat in yield by the shorter season beans that are finishing up now. Now, a few pockets did pick up an inch of rain last week. This will be huge in bean yields. SDS is definitely more visible, and leaf feeding is more prevalent. In most cases, the rain will not change the corn yields much, but these beans could sure use a drink. I need to cover an area of concern that has come up several times this past week. A grower who called in and said he went to a farmer event where the speaker told them phosphate prices are too high and he would not put any on for the next 2 years. He hasn't applied any on his ground for 2 years and has saw no yield loss. Now, my first response is that this presenter is being taken out of context. I get taken out of context all the time. Take something out of context and run it through the telephone game in the coffee shop, and some pretty wild things come about and things get off base. But we've had 10 or 15 people calling with the same story, wondering about not putting any phosphorus on for 2 years. At that point, we must address it. Now, I still believe the presenter is taking out of context, but for the purpose of this discussion, let's say he's not. Telling you not to put phosphorus on for 2 years because he did it and had no yield reduction is a little dangerous. Imagine you come to our winter seminars and I say, boys, gas prices are too high. I recommend when you go home, don't put any gas in your truck. I've come to work for 2 days in a row without putting gas in my truck, and I've made it home as well, so I don't think you need it. Now, for the 90% of you that came with a full tank, this advice would work for you. But for the 10% who came in here on a near-empty tank, with the idiot light telling you you're about to run out of fuel, it may not work so well. You know, when the tow truck driver comes to rescue you because you ran out of gas on the way home, and he asks, how'd you run out of gas? Doesn't your gas gauge work? And you say, yes it does, but my agronomist said I shouldn't fill up with gas, that I'd be all right. The tow truck driver is going to be shaking his head and wondering about your intelligence level. Guys, you are responsible for your own actions. When times get tight, we need to look for what we can cut from our operation that doesn't cut yield. When it comes to cutting pea for 2 years, you need to pay attention to your gas gauge. If you're a crop tech customer, you have a perfectly working gas gauge. It's called a soil test. And if you're in doubt about your gauge reading, you have access to an idiot light. Just call the office and we'll tell you if you got enough fuel in the tank to get home. I think I just called myself an idiot. Let's talk about some numbers to put it into perspective. Using a Bray 1 test, we like to see values in that 20 to 25 part per million range. At this point, you would expect about a 25% chance of a positive ROI to applying phosphorus. When those values drop down between 10 and 20 parts per million, you'd expect a 55 to 60% chance of a positive ROI to applying phosphorus. Now, below 10 parts per million, it's an 80 to 90% chance of a positive ROI to applying phosphorus. Now, the top end of these ranges would be true when we have low phosphorus prices and high commodity prices, while at the opposite end is true when we have low commodity prices and high phosphorus prices, as we do now. When looking at your gas gauge, in this case, your soil test, you want to know, do I have enough fuel to get me there and back? Now, in growing a crop, getting there and back is not just removal, it's what you need for uptake to grow this crop. Now, we know removal of phosphorus for 250 bushel corn and 75 bushel beans is about 140 pounds of phosphorus, or 300 pounds of DAP, diammonium phosphate. These amounts, we know, left the field in truckloads of grain. That was in the grain, but we had to build these plants to produce the grain. So the uptake for 250 bushel corn and 75 bushel beans is 430 pounds of DAP. If you only have enough fuel in the tank to satisfy removal, yields are going to drop. If your gas gauge is on low and the idiot light is on, and you don't apply P to these fields, yields will drop. But if the whole field is not spread, you won't know the yields drop because P issues are not as visible as like nitrogen and sulfur. I guess in this case, ignorance would be bliss. Now, it takes about 18 pounds of P2O5 to move your gas gauge 1 part per million. Not applying for 2 years could drop your gas gauge by 7 to 8 parts per million. Now, if you started with the test of 30 parts per million, that's most likely doable. But if you started with a test that is 15 parts per million, now you've dug yourself into a hole. To get your gas gauge from 7 parts per million back up to 25 parts per million, you'll need to apply removal rates plus build rates for some time. That would take about 150 pounds of DAP per year for removal and another 120 pounds of DAP for build, so 270 pounds of DAP per year for the next 6 years. Now, many of you have enough gas in the tank that you can pull back on your P. In some cases, complete fields can be pulled back. In other cases, certain zones can be pulled back. In times like this, we must use every tool in the toolbox to maintain yield. Taking a hit in yield because we didn't look at a working gas gauge is not something you want to be guilty of. Now, guys, we'll navigate through these tough times. Don't let emotions, coffee shop talk, or some speaker taken out of context derail your program. Use your tools, stay the course, make the plan, follow the plan. And remember, your idiot light is just a call away. To stay up to date, check out our website at croptechinc.com and subscribe to our podcast, Boots in the Field Report. Keep her safe, keep her moving.